Hi, this is Dr. Sana Hashmi. And this week in my Prince Eye on China column, I analyze what is China thinking about Japan's outreach to the Pacific Island countries. So that is primarily to counter China's growing influence in the region. And China's increasing influence in the region was witnessed again at the recently concluded 53rd Pacific Island Forum Leaders meeting in Tonga, where the Chinese representative Po Chien was able to pressurize the members to omit any reference to Taiwan in the final communique. And China is also now pushing for Taiwan's exclusion from the forum altogether. I do believe that it was a diplomatic victory for China, given there are still three PICs that still recognize Taiwan and have diplomatic ties with the country. So the Pacific Island is a region that is increasingly becoming more and more pivotal for countries such as Australia, uh, the US, Japan, and even India. We have seen how India has been reaching out to the Pacific Island countries. But for a very long time, the countries in the region have been overlooked by major powers such as the US and even Australia to some extent, despite the Pacific Island countries being in its own backyard, didn't really pay a lot of attention. And I think that gave China an opportunity to fill the strategic vacuum and somehow lure the countries in the region by giving them economic assistance. And this is specifically important given the circumstances where the countries of the region are calling for expedited efforts to tackle the climate change and how they are in dire need of economic assistance. So I believe that China is one country that has been able to make inroads and leave its footprint in the region, and there is a lot of trust, and there's a lot of uh, kind of support for China's increasing presence in the region now. So now China is really making moves in the Pacific Island region, and they have been actively trying to win over the countries in the region and offering them economic help. And this is something that has been discussed among the Chinese strategic community a lot. There's this one scholar, Chen Hong from East China Normal University, who actually uh, calls this push from the Chinese side an outcome of the strategic importance of these islands, the um, economic importance of the countries in the region. Then experts from like Chang Kaosheng and Wang Yingge both note that China's influence is definitely growing there, and they also highlight that China and the Pacific Island countries are focusing on building partnership, mutual benefit, and that's based on win-win cooperation. This is something that China's foreign relations are based on with a lot of countries. But when we talk about the social media commentators on micro blogging websites such as Weibo, um, there is a belief that the US and Australia haven't been investing as much in these smaller Pacific Island countries. And because of this, the countries from the region are turning more towards China, which is why China's presence in the region is expanding exponentially. But there is no denying that for Australia, US, Japan, the countries in the region, uh, they are the subset of their Indo-Pacific policies. And while other countries, especially the US, is still lagging behind, and especially we saw how last year the US President Joe Biden was supposed to go to one of the countries and he had to cancel at the last moment. And I think that was a missed opportunity, and that was actually utilized by China to further reach out to the countries in the region. But Japan is one country that is trying to fill the gap through regular summits and developmental aid. And Japan has definitely been taking a lot of proactive steps to counter China's growing influence. And one of these steps was in July this year, Japan held the 10th Pacific Island Leaders meeting in Tokyo that brought together leaders from 18 Pacific Island countries. So there is a lot of discussion about Japan's engagement with the PICs in Chinese media, social media, and strategic community. As in, these are smaller countries, so we would not really expect strategic community to focus on what is Japan, what is China doing in Pacific Island countries. But there's definitely a lot of discussion the about the importance of the Pacific Island countries and about what other countries, specifically Japan and India, are doing in the Pacific Islands. So, with respect to Japan, the most common perspective is that while Japan is framing the summit and engagement as a way to strengthen ties with the countries of the region, most analysts, Chinese analysts, view the summit's outcome as a strategic move to bring these countries closer to Japan's own interest. particularly in pushing back against China's growing presence in the region. So, essentially, to counter China's presence. This is one of the reasons why Japan's engagement is being seen as something that is against China's engagement and influence in the region. Um, then most Chinese scholars are seeing Japanese commitment in the summit that happened in July to boost defense exchanges through self-defense force aircraft and ships and attempt to ramp up its military activities in the South Pacific, all while presenting it as developmental aid to increase its regional influence. So definitely, they're not seeing it as something that's innocent and they're just to help out the countries in the region. And perhaps this is something that China does, and this is one of the reasons why they're also seeing other countries imitating China's approach in the Pacific Island countries. So there are a number of scholars and commentators who argue that Japan is, by engaging these countries, by engaging the security cooperation with the countries of the region, Japan is trying to hide the China threat theory. And Japan's security assistance is being seen as benefiting more Japanese military companies rather than the Pacific Island countries. And this is, of course, a narrative that is being pushed from the Chinese side. And this is something that we are seeing that, this is not something that's about the Pacific Island countries, but it is about more about China, more about these countries' own interest. So essentially, Chinese experts and commentators generally believe that Japan's efforts in the regions are more about countering China and promoting, hyping the China threat narrative than about genuine developmental assistance or climate change action. And that the Western portrayal of China as a security threat to the Pacific Island country is just another attempt to demonize China or create misunderstandings between China and the countries of the region. So, Chinese media and commentators have long criticized Japan's what they call as money diplomacy as a direct challenge to China. And then when we talk about the Pacific Island countries, we would expect that there would be more discussion about what Australia is doing. But of course, there is some discussion about what Australia is doing because these countries are considered as Australia as in the backyard of Australia. But somehow Australia's approach among the Chinese discourse is seen as more balanced or perhaps justified. But it is Japan that has been a topic of discussion among Chinese media and social media, and a lot of scholars have been talking about it. And Chinese actions are viewed with increased suspicion and directly something that is directly aimed at China. So there is also a belief that both Australia and Japan are stepping up their engagement with the Pacific to align more with the US Indo-Pacific policy and strategy, so kind of forming an anti-China coalition in the Pacific among the Pacific Island countries as well. So to conclude, definitely among Chinese media and the Chinese discourse has been that Japan's effort are seen as a strategic move to win over the Pacific Island countries to its side, and it's primarily to counter China, to counter the China threat. So I stop here and I'll see you next week. Thank you.